The NBA doesn't have enough conflict right now. They just don't. They don't have enough drama. I'm not asking them to be the Real Housewives of Orange County, but they need something to click in and something to click in fast if they're going to save their dying ratings. But that's the conflict that's needed. Caitlin Clark and now her sidekick, Sophie Cunningham, versus everyone in the league that what you want in sports is a Game 7. If you are a 7-game series, everyone in a league hopes that series goes to 7 games. Why? Well, it's more inventory for television. It helps ratings. It's more tickets that you get to charge for. It's a lot of different reasons that you want those 7 games. The NBA, they get their wish. They get a 7th game. But unfortunately for the NBA, they're getting a Game 7 in a year where ratings are really, really bad. I'm talking pre-Larry Bird, Magic Johnson bad. That's how bad it is right now across the NBA for the finals in the ratings. Clay Travis, who you just heard here on the OutKick Network with his show, he went on a bit of a Twitter rant about this very thing and said fewer people are watching the NBA Finals through 5 games than have watched since before Bird and Magic entered the league. The league's finals ratings, other than COVID year when they played in fall and competed with the NFL, have never been lower in live air history. That is not good. Clay goes on to say that, of course, 2020 was a bit of a different year for a lot of reasons. But even as recently as 2017, 20 million people watched the finals. I think 2016 was Cavs-Warriors, and there were close to 30 million that year, I feel. Or not 30 million, but 20 million that were watching that series. So ratings were good then also. Other leagues have grown in viewership in this time frame, NFL, men's and women's, NCAA. Even the WNBA, writes Clay Travis. Lots of issues, load management, rise of the three-point shot, have contributed to less fan interest, but anyone arguing the league didn't lose tens of millions of fans with woke politics is lying to themselves. Jordan was right. Republicans buy sneakers too. Clay's very smart. Even got a plug in for his book at the very end of that post. Well done, Clay. I'll say this about that last statement. Clay's right. I think people, oftentimes, they're on the other side politically of an argument, want to argue that, oh, it has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with woke or any of that. Here's the reasons why, this, and this. Clay listed those reasons. The three-point shot, the lack of defense, load management. There are a lot of contributing factors to a league declining in ratings and interest the way the NBA has. It's not just one thing. I think you're also lying to yourself if you're trying to convince anyone or yourself that political stances the league has taken isn't one of those contributing factors. It absolutely is. It is a contributing factor. It's not the only one. It may not be the biggest. If you want to argue that, I'm fine hearing that argument. But it's a factor. It is absolutely a factor in the decline of NBA ratings. There are a lot of different things to discuss when it comes to declining interest in that league. And I think a big part of it is the lack of true villains in the NBA, the lack of true heroes in the NBA, and that doesn't lead to great interest. I'm watching last night, and I'm watching the post-game press conferences. Tyrese Halliburton seems like an awesome dude. Great interview. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander seems like an awesome dude. Great interview. Thoughtful. Both were very good at the podium last night after the game. I really enjoyed listening to those guys. But the problem is the majority of America, they don't care enough about those guys, one way or the other. They don't do anything to divide anyone to say, I love this player or I hate this player. I love this team or I hate this team. And I'm not asking the Pacers and the Thunder to be fake and to be phony about who they are and what they want to be as teams. I don't want those guys to be fake or phony. I want them to be themselves. But it's not helping the league. Every great drama, the biggest contributing factor to that drama, the biggest thing that you're watching in any drama, whether it's reality TV, the latest Brad Pitt movie, whatever it is in forms of entertainment, it's conflict. It could be conflict between two characters in the drama or multiple characters. It could be inner conflict with the protagonist of a story. But there's conflict. The NBA doesn't have enough conflict right now. They just don't. They don't have enough drama. I'm not asking them to be the Real Housewives of Orange County, but they need something to click in and something to click in fast if they're going to save their dying ratings. The WNBA is a great example of this. I could not tell you how good the quality of basketball is in the WNBA. I really couldn't. I enjoy watching Caitlin Clark play the game. I enjoyed her in college. I would rather watch a college women's basketball game. I would rather watch Caitlin Clark in college than than her in the WNBA. Again, I'm not an expert on the quality of play of WNBA games. From what I've watched, I think they're talented basketball players, but I don't love the game itself. I do love Caitlin Clark's game, and I like watching her play. But what I love about the WNBA, and I think what so many of you love about the WNBA right now, is there's conflict. There's drama. There's a drama unfolding almost every night. Hell, on Tuesday night, in a game that no one really cared about going into it, the Indiana Fever and the Connecticut Sun played, and a melee broke out. And rising star Sophie Cunningham ended up intentionally fouling someone late in the game and getting ejected. She became America's sweetheart when that happened. She had a huge bump in TikTok followers. And I'm going to have the actual number for you of followers that she gained after Tuesday night. 500,000. Over 500,000 people followed her after she took out the Connecticut Sun player who took out Caitlin Clark, or sort of took out Caitlin Clark earlier in the game. Sophie Cunningham, America's sweetheart. There's a lot of reasons Sophie Cunningham is America's sweetheart, too. Sophie Cunningham is now sort of the Livy Dunn of the WNBA to me. I have no idea how good of a gymnast Livy Dunn is. I know Livy Dunn because she's really good at being hot. Sophie Cunningham looks like she's got a future because she's very, very attractive, too. She's going to have some marketing dollars come her way. Again, don't know much of her as a player. I'll start watching more now, and probably a lot of you will start watching a little bit more as well, because Sophie Cunningham went to the aid of Caitlin Clark, and she's extremely attractive, which definitely helps her cause. But that's the conflict that's needed. Caitlin Clark and now her sidekick, Sophie Cunningham, versus everyone in the league that hates them. And right now that looks like pretty much the rest of the league to varying degrees. It's great. It's great for TV viewership. Ratings have never been better for that league. And that level of drama, and I don't think it's ginned up drama. I think it's legit. Started with Angel Reese versus Caitlin Clark. And if you listen to comments from Brittany Griner, from Angel Reese, from a lot of players, Kennedy Carter a year ago, they don't like the amount of attention that Caitlin Clark gets. They don't like it at all. Speaking of attention, I'm watching SportsCenter last night after the NBA Finals. Top 3 highlights they showed in order. Number 1, NBA Finals, Game 6, Pacers winning, forcing a Game 7. Number 2, Dodgers-Padres because of a brawl that happened in the game with a little beanball being played. And number 3, Indiana Fever versus Golden State Valkyries, an expansion team in the WNBA. That was the 3rd highlight on SportsCenter, leading the night. It's working. Conflict sells. It's what every great drama possesses. And the WNBA has it right now. The NBA doesn't. Speaking of the NBA, we got to get into this Lakers sell. $10 billion the Buss family will be getting as Mark Walter buys the majority stake in the team. Crazy number. Crazy valuation. We'll talk about that when we come back. Daniel Starkand is with Lakers Nation. He's the managing editor. He's going to join us to talk about the Lakers and everything going on this offseason. That's next. Jeanie Buss was a very rich woman before, but that Buss family just got a lot richer with the sale to Mark Walter, who will become the majority owner of the Los Angeles Lakers. Daniel Starkand is with Lakers Nation, and he's on with us right now to talk about what is a very wealthy transaction with the Lakers. Daniel, first off, thanks for taking the time to hop on with us. And I guess my first question with this is, how does this change the day-to-day of the Lakers operation, or is it too early to know how things are going to change now moving forward?
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate you guys having me on. And I think it's going to be a big change personally. I followed the Dodgers as well, so I'm very familiar with Mark Walter and his group. And when they bought the team, the Dodgers back in 2012, there was almost immediate changes. I won't say like right away, like he didn't just come in and fire everyone, but he came in and had like I'll say a 2-year evaluation period where they kind of were just getting the lay of the land and deciding, what changes they want to make, who they want to keep on board. And they did end up making, pretty much wholesale changes to the organization when you're talking about front office, coaching staff, people on the business side and whatnot. So I think we're going to see more of the same with the Lakers. As of now, Jeanie is expected to stay on as the governor, so she's still kind of going to be the face of this whole thing for now. We'll see how long that lasts, but I would expect the Lakers to be run more as a business than the family, operation that they've been running for the last however many years. So yeah, obviously we know, you mentioned the $10 billion valuation. There's obviously a lot of money behind this new group coming in, and I would expect changes to come with that.
Winning Time on HBO was one of my favorite shows of the last few years. So a lot of people got to know Dr. Jeanie Buss a lot better. Yep. With John C. Reilly's portrayal of him in that. And Jeanie was a part of that show also. I say all that to say that this is a celebrity ownership group, right? Like there's not a ton of sports owners that you could say the name and most everyone's going to know who they are and which team they own. The Buss family is one of those ownership groups. So that's a huge shift, right? That it's not going to be a member of that family running the Lakers and being the face of that organization. It's got to be a drastic change moving forward, even if there is this time period where Jeanie Buss is still going to be the forward-facing person for the Lakers.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And, Mark Walter has owned the Dodgers for 12 or 13 years now, however long it's been. And I would guess a lot of people didn't even know who he was until this Lakers sale came to be. So that's kind of the way he runs.
By the way, those are the best owners usually, too. The ones you never really see their face or hear from them, they tend to have the most successful operations.
Yep, exactly. That's a great point. And I think that's, what we've seen with the Dodgers, where he's hired the right people in all of the different departments. And he's, for better or for worse, I guess you could say, has just let them do their thing. And obviously with the Dodgers, it has led to a lot of success. So yeah, like you said about the Buss family, they are kind of more of the celebrity, family owners. And I think that's going to be a big change where, there might not necessarily be one face of the organization, but I think behind the scenes, there's going to be a ton of work, getting done to build the Lakers into, the brand that they have always been and should continue to be.
It feels like LeBron James had a ton of sway with the Buss family and the Buss regime, right? And I know that he was a part of the one championship in the COVID year in 2020 for the Lakers, but when you look at his influence on that team with some decisions that were made with LeBron in mind, for a guy that's aging out of the league, the way LeBron James is here, in the not too distant future, I'm sure. Does that change? Is that a big question moving forward, or are Lakers fans kind of sitting back and saying, we're more concerned about Luka Doncic and what he thinks than what LeBron James thinks moving forward? How does that dynamic change now?
Yeah, I think we've already seen that dynamic start to shift over the last, I'll say 12 months, going back to last offseason when, LeBron put it out there that he was willing to take a pay cut if the Lakers could get so-and-so players and whatnot. And I'd say, going back to, since the Russell Westbrook trade, I'd say, the Lakers have kind of, stop listening to LeBron as much when it comes to roster moves. And the fact of the matter is, he's turning 41 in December, and, everyone expects him to be back this season. But after that, no one really knows. So like you said, there definitely has been that shift, to more, what does Luka want? Obviously, they make the big trade in February, and now they're on Luka's timeline, not necessarily LeBron's. But I don't know how much the ownership, change really affects that all that much. I will say there was, a report came out yesterday, and also Luka put out a tweet, essentially expressing his excitement. And of course, he's been through something similar before in Dallas. So my first thought was like, is there, maybe some sort of hesitation on his end to fully commit just because he saw what happened in Dallas? So we'll kind of see how all that plays out. But I do think maybe the best thing about, Mark Walter and his group outside of, their deep pockets, of course, is that they really know how to treat players and their families and people within the organization. And that's what we've seen with the Dodgers, where, of course, they've been willing to pay for a lot of stars, but they've also made other moves, to accommodate, their players and whatnot. Most recently this year, we've seen that a report recently came out that the Dodgers got a second plane so that they could fly families out, and, they have a big traveling party. So I think that will probably be the biggest change is we'll see. And I will say the Buss family was very accommodating, to players as well, especially star players. We saw them take care of Kobe in his later years. And like you just mentioned with LeBron, they've essentially done everything he's asked. So I would expect more of the same. But yeah, I definitely think with this new ownership group, there will be even more of an emphasis on, what can we do extra to make sure our players feel comfortable here.
I know it's a unique situation because Luka joined a roster that happened to have one of the greatest players of all time on that roster, but he clearly is the guy moving forward given his age and his star power. Did he take to that quickly with the Lakers, with LA, with being the guy in that city? I know it's been a short time that he's been there, but do you get the sense that he's that type of dude that is going to relish being a Laker and all that means?
It is an interesting dynamic just because, like you said, he came to a team that had, a superstar already in place and arguably the biggest superstar in league history in LeBron James. And we know Luka, grew up idolizing LeBron. So there is, a mutual respect there. But I do think, it was only, 3 months that was here or whatever. I definitely saw Luka being willing to take on, a leadership role with the team. And I do think, with LeBron obviously still being here for another year, I don't think there will be that full transition until he's gone at least. But I think it'll be kind of like co-leadership type of thing. But I think Luka he's built for the bright lights. He knows, what it's like to put a franchise on his back. Like, he was the EuroLeague MVP when he was like 17, 18 years old. And then, of course, he comes over to the NBA and is a top 10 player from day one, seemingly, and right now is, one of the brightest stars in the league. So this is not something he isn't used to. Obviously, LA's a slightly bigger market than Dallas, but I think, the 3 months he had here has kind of helped, get accustomed to that. And I think, obviously, the team needs to make the adequate roster upgrades for them to, elevate themselves to championship contender status. And that would probably help Luka's decision to stay. But from everything I've heard and seen, since the trade, he likes it here and has no plans of leaving at any time.
It was pretty easy to figure out what LeBron James wanted, at times. He was either vocal about it or we all kind of knew his guys and his preferred players that he plays with. It's harder for me to get a sense of that with Luka Doncic. Covering him, covering this team, what do you think Luka wants ultimately as a supporting cast around him? And or maybe there's some names to watch this offseason for the Lakers that would fit what Luka wants?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at, the roster that he made it to the finals with in Dallas, like I think that's, more or less a good model to go off of. Like first of all, you need a center. Like we know the Lakers didn't have any centers last season and it wound up costing them in the playoffs. So that's priority number one. And that's, going back to the trade deadline last year, that's pretty much what Luka expressed to the organization. And that's why we saw them being willing to go out and get a guy like Mark Williams. Obviously, the trade didn't end up happening, but that was an aggressiveness that we hadn't seen from the Lakers in a couple years. Like Anthony Davis was begging for them to bring in a center and they never did. But then Luka gets here and they made a trade within 2 days. So I think, that's priority number one is a center. And I think defense is the most important thing because we know Luka isn't, some lockdown defender. And we know looking at elsewhere on the Lakers roster, like Austin Reeves isn't a lockdown defender. LeBron, can defend well at times, but the guy's going to be 41 years old in his 23rd season. So, you don't want to be relying on him as the anchor of your defense, as we pretty much saw with what the roster was at the end of this last season. And it didn't work out too well. So I think, the center position and then defense and shooting, I would say would be the priorities.
As a 43-year-old, I can say it's tougher to stay in a stance for a long period of time defensively. So I feel LeBron on that one as you get into your 40s. J.J. Redick, How tight is his hold on this team? What has that been like through one season now? And when you look at his role leading the team from a coaching perspective, how strong is that with JJ Redick in this Lakers group?
I think with this ownership change, like it's fair to question everyone's, job security in the organization. Maybe not in the short term. Like I don't think they're going to come in and fire, Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick and make changes. But I don't think that's deserved either way. Like I think JJ Redick had a really good first season as a head coach, and he had his flaws, no doubt. But you hope that a rookie head coach like that is going to learn from the mistakes he made in his first season and will be better. Specifically talking about the playoffs. Like I think he had a really good regular season, but in the playoffs is kind of where we saw his shortcomings. But from by all accounts, the players love him, and that's kind of half the job. Like if you lose your locker room and your players are out on you, you're probably not going to have that job much longer. So by all accounts, Luka loves playing, for JJ. LeBron, we obviously know they're good friends. Austin is really close with him as well. So we'll kind of see what happens in his second season. Does he take a step back as a head coach? Does he kind of fix some of the issues he had last year? And who knows, maybe we're talking about him as one of the elite coaches in the league a year from now. But I would say, it's wait and see mode, just because, if things go south, there could be changes sooner rather than later. But, we know the Lakers have kind of struggled to find their long-term head coach since Phil Jackson. And me personally, I think JJ very well could be that guy. You just got to give it more time.